What's up, guys? We're going to work on a framework and an illustration of how to share the gospel. And so I'm sitting here with my non-Christian friend, Tim. He really needs to hear the gospel. And so we're going to walk through how we can share the gospel with him using 4 words: creation, fall, rescue, and new creation. And we're going to use an illustration to do that. Before we jump into how to share the gospel with our friend, what we need to talk about, what we need to think about is how to transition into a gospel conversation. And if you've ever had a spiritual conversation with someone, you know there's tons of ways that you can transition into a gospel conversation. But one great way that you can do that is by identifying a need that your friend has that they communicate to you. And sometimes they'll just come straight out and tell you. Sometimes you need to ask some questions to dig in a little bit and to get them to open up about what they're feeling, the needs that they have. So just a few minutes ago, Tim was telling me, hey Matt, I've been just struggling in life. I've been feeling like my life is meaningless. I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm questioning whether my life has value and purpose. I don't really know what to do. And so Tim has opened up to me about this need. And so I want to transition into a gospel conversation with Tim by saying something along the lines of, man, I'm sorry to hear that. That's a tough thing. I've definitely dealt with thoughts like that myself, of thinking, is my life purposeful? Do I have meaning? And something that's been so transformational for me as I've had thoughts like that is something actually that the Bible speaks about. So can I share with you what's been so transformational in my life that the Bible speaks into? A lot of people are familiar with a lot of different little stories in the Bible, like David and Goliath, or stories about Jesus. But what a lot of people don't realize, what I didn't realize for a long time, is that these little stories actually make up one big overarching story of the Bible. You could call it God's story. And the awesome thing about God's story is that God's story relates to every single one of our individual stories. And so I want to share that story with you right now using these 4 words. So I'm going to draw a little illustration for us just to help us walk through this story. And this story starts at the very beginning with creation. All right, I'm going to go ahead and write the word creation in this first circle. So in the beginning of God's story, God created the world to be a place full of His goodness. He created it to be a place where we're in close relationship with Him and in good relationship with other people. He created us to find our purpose and our significance and our value and our security in Him and who He's created us to be. But you know what? When we look around at our world today, we don't see this world full of goodness. Like you were just saying, Tim, sometimes we struggle with these feelings of meaninglessness. So what happened? That's what the next part of the story is about. It's the fall. So I'm going to go ahead and write the fall in the second circle. Not long after God created the world, this good world in relationship with Him, not long after that, humanity chose to turn away from God, the way that He created things, and to pursue purpose and value and significance apart from Him in rebellion. And what the Bible calls this rebellion is sin. And everyone ever since then, all the way up until our time, has turned away from God in sin. Can you think of anything, Tim, that people turn to find their value or their security or their significance? Yeah, some of the things that I can think of are sometimes people try to find significance or purpose in their career. People try to find it in relationships. People try to find it in all kinds of things. But the result of looking for these things apart from God is that our relationship with God is separated. It's broken. And on top of our relationship with God being broken, our relationship with other people is broken. And now as a result, we look at our world, and our world in this fallen state is a world full of brokenness. Man, this is difficult news to hear. This is the hard part of the story. But the great news is that the next part of the story is the good news, is God choosing to step in. So the next part of the story is the rescue. So I'm going to go ahead and write rescue in this third circle. Because God loved us so much, because He desires for us to be in relationship with Him and to have right relationships with one another, like He originally created the world to be, He saw us in our brokenness and He stepped in. God came down to us. He lived a perfect life, never sinning once. He died on the cross in our place, and then He came back to life from the dead to show that He has power to give us new life. Jesus knows that we can't rescue ourselves from our brokenness, and He freely offers to rescue us, to pull us out of our fall if we turn from our rebellion and we put our trust in the fact that He died for us and that He rose again from the dead. He will freely rescue us from our sin. This takes us to the last part of God's story, which is new creation. When Jesus rescues us from our sin, you know what? The reality is we still live in a world that's full of brokenness. We live in a world that's full of sin still. And even ourselves, we still struggle with sin. We struggle to run back to things other than God to try to find our purpose and our significance. But the good news that Jesus rescues us from sin to bring us back into relationship with God gets even better with this last part of the story, where God says, I'm going to continue to work into you to pull sin out of your heart and to give you a new heart that desires to be close to me, that draws close to me. And you know what? At the end of the story, God says, there's going to be a day where I'm going to completely take sin out of the world. I'm going to completely remove the brokenness. And for those that I've rescued, they're going to live in perfect relationship with me, perfect relationship once again with one another, in perfect relationship in a world full of purpose and significance and security. This is God's story. So at this point, we've shared the 4 parts of the gospel story. And I'm about to call Tim to respond to the story that he's just heard. But before I do that, you just want to make sure that you ask, hey, Tim, did this make sense? Did you have questions about some of the stuff that we talked about? And let him ask his questions and try to help him walk through those questions. But after you've done that, the next thing that I want to do with Tim is say, hey, Tim, you know, just like in our stories, how we have a past, a present that we're living in, and a future to our stories, God's story has a past, a present, and a future. And everybody falls within one of the 2 parts of the present of God's story, either in the fall or the rescue. Every single person is in one of these 2 circles right now. So Tim, looking at these 2 circles, which would you say that you're in? Would you say that you're here in the fall, in the brokenness? Or has there been a time where you said, hey, I've turned and I've trusted in Jesus' death and resurrection for me, and I know He's rescued me from my sin? Which of these 2 circles would you say that you're in? So after your friend tells you which of these 2 circles they say they're in, typically they're going to say that they're in the fall if they're being honest with you where they're at. And so from that point, you want to call them to a decision. Hopefully, after you've shared the gospel with them, they're ready to make the decision to say, yes, I'm ready to turn from my sin and I'm ready to put my trust in Jesus. But a lot of times, people aren't going to be ready to make that next step. So a question for you to give to them, to call them to a decision is, hey, Tim, what is it that is keeping you from turning from your sin and putting your trust in Jesus? And give him a chance to give you the answer. And once he answers that question, call him to make a decision, something like, hey, I would love to help you think through that and work through that more, to talk more about the questions that you have. Why don't we plan on getting together again next week and talk more about this?